Welcome back to Munro Live, and we're doing a little bit of a comparison today. So we've done a video on the Rivian seat. There is a video on the Ford Lightning seat. So now we're going to do kind of a side-by-side. Now some people would say, oh, are you going to say which one's better, which one's worse? 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, because there are different things that are better on each of them. And then if I'm thinking long term, that's a whole nother thought process. So personally for me, if I were looking at these seats side by side and I was saying which one do I think is higher quality, which one do I think is more luxurious, I would have to say that is the Rivian seat. Now, how do I define that? I would partially define it by the materials that were used. I would partially define it by the style, but then I would also look at the execution, how well they were able to do it. Now, it's hard to point to any one thing or any one problem and say, this is why it's bad, but I can give a small example. Look right here. This is a minor thing. We have a folded seam. We have a decorative seam going over top. It makes a very inconsistent, bulbous look. Now, that's just one minor point, but there are points like that throughout this entire seat. Now, when you step back, it's not too egregious. It's still a very nice premium seat, but all of those little things add up. And when you look at it, your eye just says, that is not as good of quality as the Rivian seat. When we look at the way they designed their stitching and their pattern, they purposely avoided conditions that caused that look on the Ford. It is much cleaner. All right, so is that praise for Rivian? I will say that is praise for Rivian's style and design team there. Now there's two different design teams. There's the design team that comes up with the A-surface look, and then you have the designers that build all of the individual components. Those two groups must fight against each other. And the people that designed the components did not fight hard enough against the people that were coming up with the design. So even though this is a very appealing, premium looking seat, this is a dumb design for several reasons. All right, let's point to one. Look at these feet. There are 4 points that this gets bolted into the vehicle. Here is the cap. After this is bolted in, this cap is put into place. This cap is the same, all 4 legs. So with driver and passenger seat, that means this is the exact same part number in 8 positions in this vehicle. Well, let's look at the cap on the Rivian. Here's this foot. Here's that foot. All right, they're already different. And then if you go to the rear, they're also different. But this is even worse. I don't have them both on there, but if you look at them side by side, they look to be roughly the same size. They're not. That one is about 2 millimeters taller than this one. The width is the same. You really telling me that you could not change that surface up 2 millimeters so that you could use the same cap from side to side? So now we basically have at least 3 or 4 different caps per seat to install that in vehicle. That's just dumb. More part numbers, more handling issues, likelihood of mixing something up. That's just bad. Now another thing, this is the seat as removed from the vehicle. So let's get a side shot here. Now I have taken this apart, put it back together, so it's not perfect, but this is as you would see it, lifting it up, popping it in the vehicle. Let's look at the Rivian. What is going on here? Okay. Because of this belt anchorage, which they tied to the structure, the belt anchorage gets bolted in place. This B-side cover or hidden cover gets bolted over top of that. This front shield then gets installed, wrapped around the side. It passes through the belt. Okay. Then there is this front panel that gets snapped and then screwed in place on the front. And this is part of the B-pillar, which has to be pre-installed to the belt because it cannot go up to the B-pillar since this has to feed through. And that basically has to get shipped into the plant with that sitting on the seat having possibility of damage and being banged around. That was stupid. Just adds a lot more parts, a lot more complexity, cost in all of that, higher likelihood of damage, scrap. That should not happen. That is a design issue. Okay, how else have they almost purposefully wasted money on this seat? All of these plastic components, everything that you see here is painted. So it is still a hard plastic part, but then they paint that plastic part. Is there a reason that you're painting the lower foot cover that's underneath the panel? All of the plastics on the Ford are just mold in color. They come out of the mold in that color. Now you could change that color. It doesn't have to be black. They can have the slight gray look, but for them, they decided black was fine. All right, so that is a lot of expense. That was a development or design decision, which they probably did not need to take on. Now the materials, I do want to do a correction. We were assuming that this was leather. Now, why was I assuming it was leather? Look at this. Normally, whenever you have leather, there is a skin surface and then you have the fibers of the leather behind it. When you press on it, oh, here's a good one. You see the break in the surface causing all of those wrinkles? That normally only happens on real leather. Whenever you have a vinyl type material, like let's say the side of this, the material pushes in evenly, you don't have those breaks. But this, which has real leather here, on the real leather you will see those wrinkles. All right, so it wasn't just that. When we took this apart, we looked at the cross section and we saw it was a thick cross section and it was uniform color throughout. Normally on a vinyl you don't have uniform color. So here's a couple vinyls. Here's one, you have your artificial surface and then you have a non-woven fabric backing. I think this is all the same one, but this. Here's a piece of real leather. Leather has a very consistent look on the back. This is a piece of vinyl with that consistent look on the back. This material I was working with several years ago as a development project trying to get approved for automotive use. We were halfway through development and then the company that made that material came to us and said, we're canceling the program, we're not going to sell this for automotive anymore, so I didn't touch it again. I don't know if it was from that company or if it was another supplier, but it looks like someone else did come up with an artificial material that had a construction thickness very similar to leather. All right, so we know they're painting plastic parts. All right, then we have the back panel. When we were sitting in the vehicle, I was assuming that this was a mold in color panel. Hard plastic surface, just has a textured grain on it, and I was wrong. That is a wrapped artificial material, wrapped vinyl. Very, very thin, very dense vinyl. So they're paying to wrap a part that, in all honesty, this should be an injection mold in color. Now, not only that, let's talk about labor. See this adhesive here? That is a solvent-based spray adhesive. I can tell from the color, I can tell from the texture. So they're spraying adhesive on this A surface, wrapping the A surface. But then they have to wrap around the edge. All right, here's the edge. This is not a spray. This is a hand brush. So what does that mean for us? That means that someone is taking this part, they're putting it on a cell. They have the sprayed adhesive on the A surface. They are wrapping their cover, fixing everything. They are then flipping it over, and then with basically a cup of glue and a little brush, they are brushing solvent-based adhesive around these edges and then making the wrapping. So someone's getting high on the assembly line with that little cup of adhesive as they're trying to edge wrap all of this material. That is very, very labor intensive. Now that is very labor intensive on a part that should be an injection molded, mold in color, even painted, I would be fine with. But this should not be wrapped. That's just throwing away more money. All right, so in general, that $74,000 vehicle as we purchased it $94,000 vehicle as we purchased it. A design that has matured over many, many years, knowing where they need to cut costs, where they can put their money. A design from the beginning saying, let's go spectacular. But again, I do not see Rivian being able to be profitable with the decisions that they made on this seat. Now, this is why I want to say the decisions that they made on this seat. Sometimes people, or these early startup OEMs, want to get a vehicle in the market and they say, then we will save money over time. We will cut costs over time after we've already designed this part. Here's your problem. One of the graphics from Munro, your design, your upfront design, when you're still sitting in CAD space or you're trying to work out a plan, a logistics plan, how am I going to build this part? That design, which most people only put in 5% of their investment into the design, has an effect on 70% of the possible profits for your part. So now once we are past this, the opportunities here are gone. So now we're on to materials. Because of this design, these are the materials that we purchased. All right, so I'm paying 50% of the money for this seat just in the materials that are going into this seat. But the materials can only give me a 20% savings. Maybe I can negotiate 5% on the total cost of the artificial material. Maybe I can take 5% off of the painting. Maybe I can save and re-nest my materials so that I use less materials. You have a possibility of only 20% of total profit coming out of your materials. Then you get to your labor. So the people that are on the line building these parts, in truth, they cannot add anything to your profits, but they can take away an awful lot. Because the way you designed your line, because of the way you designed your product, dictates how the assembly line labor must assemble these parts, what they have to put into those parts. They can't change up, they can't decide, well, I'm not going to paint this part, or well, I'm not going to do this to save the company money. You have a very fixed amount there. So even though you are paying 15% of the total cost is going into the labor, you really can only get a 5% savings out of labor through efficiencies. But if these people have problems in the plant, scrap rates go up, they can destroy your profit in the negative. Then you have your overhead, the amount of money that I paid for my plant, that I paid for logistics, overhead management. You can't really make any excess profit off of that. So all of your real profit possibilities come in this product design phase. So what can Rivian do? Here's their problems. If they wanted to try and cut costs on what they've already designed, they're probably not going to be able to do it. They decided that they were going to have painted components. Okay, let's get rid of the paint. Well, if they get rid of the paint, they're probably going to have to treat their injection molding tools differently. Whether they have to regrain the tools, change the raw material. Here's the problem. If they want to change the raw material, each material has its own shrink rate. The injection molding tool must be designed for the shrink rate of that material. So I can't just change material in an injection mold. I have to design a mold for that. So that means if I want to take paint, I might have to possibly have new injection molding tools made. These caps, those 4 different caps on this seat, unless they throw away the tools they've already built, build new tools to commonize, they're not going to be able to save money on their decision for these caps. Their decision on how this belt attached to the seat, that is very labor intensive and it adds up a lot of components. If they can move that belt to below the B pillar mounting into the floor, that would be beneficial to them. They could save money, but they would have to scrap all of these tools that they've already paid for, new design, new tools. So anything that they try to do to try and save money on this seat goes all the way back to the product design phase and requires a redesign. It is true that when an electric vehicle is starting out, the suppliers look at them and say, I don't know if this company is going to be around. I don't know if I can rely on them to purchase in the quantity that they said they would. They want me to put in money to build an assembly line in my plant. I have to build in racking. I have to design the logistics. And they're telling me because they're going to sell 50,000 vehicles per year. I plan for the 50,000. Then they fall short and they only build 10. Well, now I have all of that overhead that I've invested in. So for the startups, lots of times the suppliers will jack up the price, but not enough negotiating power and savings to fix the bad design decisions that Rivian made, in my opinion. So yes, looking at the look of this Rivian seat, I really like the look of the seat. I think that it was done with a lot of quality. I would say this is a much more quality finished seat than the Ford Lightning Platinum. But I don't believe that this seat as is can survive at either this price point or through redesign and future model years, because this is a very inefficient design. I don't want to be too negative. I think that Rivian did do a lot of great and wonderful things, but I don't see how they can continue forward if they're making decisions like this. So in that, am I saying I am praising Ford? Yes and no. What is my criticism in looking at this seat? Well, I know that Ford has a lot of suppliers that will do their cut and sew. High volume cut and sew. They're making 1 million a year, so they have a plant, most likely in Mexico, that they've determined you're gonna sew all of our seats for us, and they're used to doing those very high runs of everything that they're popping in, a Ford Focus or all of those real mass market cars. And then Ford decided, well, I wanna have a platinum version. Let's have the same people that are making our really cheap covers make the platinum covers. I'm guessing now. Maybe they went to someone else, but I really don't think that they would. I think what we're seeing here is the quality expectation you get from someone who is used to the quality expectation for a high volume vehicle, but yet trying to make something for a luxury vehicle. It is a different mindset, it is a different capability, and it is a different design. How you designed how these faces came together matters for your quality of sewing, your quality of your finished product. That's why I feel that they could have done better if they were to partner with someone who had a high quality mind in the initial design and development of this seat. You can't just rely on your studio designers to know how these materials are going to behave and what you're asking of them. So in the end, would I say which one is worth it? At $94,000, I know from tearing apart this Platinum behind us that the upgrade from the $70,000 version, you're not getting enough upgrades in my mind to justify the $20,000. The main interior upgrade is this seat. And does this seat justify $20,000 to me? No, it does not. I would rather have the $70,000 version. For Rivian, I do believe that this was $74,000 that we had purchased, but I am told that this level has now increased in cost, which makes sense. They would need to increase their costs to justify what they did here. But even the cost increase that they've already done, I do not believe is going to lead to profitability. So who am I talking to? Am I talking to someone who's buying one of these vehicles, or am I talking to someone who is trying to understand how to design something going forward? Don't just think that this is an afterthought in an electric vehicle or in a startup. There is an awful lot of cost, there's an awful lot of logistics, there's an awful lot of upfront thought that must be put into all of these various components. Now, because I'm more of an interiors person, I've paid a lot of attention to those interior decisions. I know what the effects are. I know the decision that the management makes has a huge ripple effect. It has first, second, third order consequences due to their decisions. You need to have people in the room who have the foresight to understand what those consequences are, and then second guess and question the decisions of management. So I hope this was somewhat entertaining. Again, I'm not saying one is better than the other. They both fit in different areas. But I wanted you to see my thought process when I look at these and understand what matters. For the development side, I don't really care what matters for the customer as much, because that's on you to decide the style that you choose. So thank you very much for watching Munro Live. And if you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe. We will have more content for the torn down Lightning behind us. So have a good day.